In this section, we move on to the fat-soluble vitamins. So the fat-soluble vitamins are vitamins A, D, E, and K, and they are found with fats in foods. And they require special handling for absorption, transport, and excretion as compared to water-soluble vitamins. And their excretion limitation increases their risk of toxicity. So water-soluble vitamins, typically they're less likely to have toxic side effects, and you consume quite a bit more than the RDA without having serious toxicity issues, because they normally urinate them out with the water if you take too many of them. But the fat-soluble vitamins, it's a different scenario. They're stored in the liver and in our fat tissue or adipose tissue, and intakes can vary without a risk of deficiency if based on our average intake over weeks and months to meet our needs. So the first one we're going to talk about is vitamin A, and you probably heard that eating carrots would help you see in the dark, and that turns out to be true because carrots are a good source of beta-carotene, which is a provitamin that can be converted into vitamin A in your body, and vitamin A is needed for vision and healthy eyes. Vitamin A in our diet is found both in preformed and in provitamin form in our diet. Preformed vitamin A compounds are known as retinoids, and 3 retinoids active in the body are retinol and retinol and retinoic acid, and they have different functions. The second type of preformed vitamin A compound is called carotenoids, and these are the yellow-orange pigment found in plants, some which are vitamin A precursors, and once inside the body they can be converted into retinoids. So beta-carotene is the most potent vitamin A precursor, additionally alpha-carotene found in dark green vegetables, carrots and squash, and beta-cryptoxanthin, which is found in papayas, sweet red peppers, winter squash, and all, are also provitamin A carotenoids, and they're not converted into retinoids as efficiently as beta-carotene. But carotenoids that are not converted into retinoids may function as antioxidants and may play a role in protecting against cancer and heart disease. So, as far as functions of vitamin A, they're involved in cell differentiation. They're part of the visual pigment in the eye, and like I said, they function as antioxidants. So here we can see a diagram of the visual cycle, and we know that vitamin A deficiency causes blindness by interfering with the maintenance of epithelial tissue, and this deficiency is a threat to the sight, health, and lives of millions of children in developing countries. We know that the lining of the eye normally contains cells that secrete mucus, which lubricates the eye, and when these cells die, immature cells differentiate to become mucus-secreting cells that replace the dead ones. And without vitamin A, the immature cells can't differentiate normally, and instead of mucus-secreting cells, they become cells that produce a hard protein called keratin. So what is the RDA for vitamin A? It's 900 micrograms, 700 micrograms for women. Sources of vitamin A are eggs and dairy, provitamin A in fruits and vegetables, beta-carotene in orange, yellow, and dark green vegetables. We know that deficiencies can cause night blindness progressing to permanent blindness, abnormal jawbone growth in children, and increased infections. And excesses can do a lot: nausea, vomiting, headache, dizziness, blurred vision, lack of muscle coordination, birth defects, limb damage, bone fractures. So caution, caution, because remember, we don't urinate out vitamin A. It stores in our body. And you may have seen people that have juiced a lot or with carrot juice, their skin turns an orangish color from them storing so much vitamin A. Sources: carrots, mustard greens, apricots, dairy products, organ meats, and eggs. And here's a visual representation when the mucus secreting cells are replaced by the keratin producing cells on the right. The surface of the eye becomes dry and cloudy, and as the xerophthalmia progresses, the drying of the cornea results in ulcerations and infections, and if left untreated, it's irreversible and causes permanent damage. And it really is a public health issue, the importance of vitamin A deficiency, and you can see the colors in the dark burgundy are areas where this is still a real problem in today's society. Here, this is a great picture that shows you someone who was taking beta-carotene supplements or was consuming regular large amounts of carrot juice, and we see the hyperkeratinemia. The hand on the right illustrates this buildup of carotenoids in the adipose tissue, and at this point it's harmless, but it makes the skin look yellow-orange, particularly in the palms of the hand and the soles of the feet. Vitamin D, we're hearing a lot about that in the news. It's made in the skin with exposure to ultraviolet light. It's inactive until it's modified in the livers and kidneys, and it's essential in the diet when exposure to sunlight is limited or the body's ability to synthesize it is reduced. And I talked about that a little bit at the beginning of the chapter. It's also known as the sunshine vitamin because it can be made in the skin with the exposure to ultraviolet light. And because vitamin D can be made in the body, it is essential in the diet only when exposure to sunlight is limited or there is a limiting factor in the body's ability to synthesize it, or it's reduced absorption. So whether vitamin D, whether from the diet or from synthesis in the skin, is inactive until it's modified by biochemical reactions in the liver and kidneys. Active vitamin D is needed to maintain normal levels of the minerals calcium and phosphorus in the blood, and calcium is important to bone health, but it also needed for proper functioning of nerves, muscles, glands, and other tissues. And blood levels of calcium are regulated so that a steady supply of the mineral is available when and where it's needed. So, maintains normal functions of calcium and phosphorus. That's a function of vitamin D. Calcium, we need it for all of the aforementioned reasons. Low blood calcium stimulates the parathyroid hormone PTH to release, which stimulates vitamin D activation in the liver and kidneys. And we know as part of gene expression in the intestines, it turns on genes for calcium absorption and turns on genes for bone breakdown. It's involved in the immune system, helps fight infection, muscle function. Some people who with vitamin D deficiency, especially in alcoholism, may complain of muscle pain, all over muscle pain, and sometimes vitamin D supplementation can help with that. Cardiovascular function for healthy heart and circulation, respiratory system for healthy lungs and airways, brain development, and it has anti-cancer effects. So what is the RDA? Adult 70 under, 700 international units, or 15 micrograms a day. It's widespread in our diet, in liver, egg yolks, oily fish, salmon, and fortified foods. Deficiency can cause low calcium absorption, leading to rickets in children. We see that in their pigeon breasts and bowed legs, and osteomalacia in other individuals. We do see that possibly leading for osteoporosis, so loss of minerals from bone, bone pain, muscle aches, and increase in bone fractures. Excess causes high calcium concentrations in the blood and urine. We can get soft tissue deposits of calcium in blood vessels and kidneys, and even cardiovascular damage. So as with everything, you have to be cautious about how much you're taking. Sources: salmon is a very high source, dairy products, eggs, some organ meats. And here's a terrible picture of a vitamin D deficiency. Rickets causes short stature and bone deformities, and the characteristic bone legs occur because the bones are too weak to support the body. So it's most common in children with poor diets and little exposure to sunlight, and in those with disorders that affect fat absorption, and in vegan children who do not receive adequate exposure to sunlight. We see here you can see the angle in which the sun strikes the earth and affects the body's ability to synthesize vitamin D in the skin. So during the winter at latitudes greater than 40 degrees north or south, there's not enough UV radiation to synthesize adequate amounts of vitamin D. But during the spring and summer and fall at 42 degrees latitude, as little as 5 to 10 minutes a day sun exposure 3 times weekly can provide a light-skinned individual with adequate vitamin D. Here's, we talk about, we know that sunscreen decreases vitamin D synthesis by 99%. So it's, sunscreen, we need it for skin cancer, and we know that here in Florida, but some time in the sun without sunscreen may be needed to meet the vitamin D needs. So in the summer, children and active adults usually spend enough time outdoors without sunscreen to meet their vitamin D needs. Concealing clothing, the picture on the bottom, by women of certain culture and religious groups prevents sunlight from striking the skin, and this can explain why a vitamin D deficiency occurs in women and children in some of the sunniest regions of the world. The elderly are also typically covering their skin with clothing when they're outdoors, or elderly that live in nursing homes. We find that to be an issue because they're not going outside. And the risk of vitamin D deficiency in elderly people is further compounded because they often consume a diet that's low in vitamin D, and the ability to synthesize the vitamin D in the skin declines with age. In the upper right, we see dark skin pigmentation prevents UV lights from penetrating into the layers of the skin where vitamin D is formed, and reduces the ability to make vitamin D in the skin by as much as 99%. We find that dark-skinned individuals living in temperate climates have a higher rate of vitamin D deficiency than those living near the equator where they get more sun. Vitamin E, so we did A, D, E, and moving on to AD. I always remember ADEK, A-D-E-K, so water-soluble vitamins. To antioxidant, protects lipids, red blood cells, white blood cells, nerve cells. It defends against cell damage. It reduces our risk of heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, macular degeneration, and lots of chronic diseases. It's anti-inflammatory. It has a regulation of cell growth, detoxification of harmful substances. And we know that, we talked about antioxidants a little bit, but you know that they decrease the adverse effects of free radicals. Free radicals is a molecule with one or more unpaired electron, and it can react with compounds, making them cells unstable. So we know that an antioxidant steals the electron from another, but the antioxidants neutralizes these free radicals by donating one of their electrons. The antioxidants are donor electrons, and prevents these free radicals from attacking and causing cellular damage. So vitamin E functions, we see the graphical representation. RDA, sources, there, seeds, nuts, plants, oil, leafy greens. Deficiency, we can see anemia. We know that there's no reported effects of excess